What's happening, guys? Today we are looking at how to factorize trinomials. Alright, so let's look first of all at our standard form. So we generally have a trinomial in this state. Okay, note the descending powers of x. Right, we have an x squared over here, then an x, and then no x's. Okay, so if you ever get a question that's not in this order, just rewrite it so that it's in descending powers of x, and then we can get cracking on how to actually factorize this guy. Okay, cool. So let's have a look at what these signs over here tell us about how we're going to factorize it. So we can actually know quite a lot about how we're going to factorize this just from the signs that they give us. So for example, let's say we have ax squared plus bx and then a positive c. So what does this positive over here let us know? Okay, so what it tells us is that the signs inside of our brackets, both of those brackets that we're going to factorize, are the same sign. The same sign. Okay, so either they're both positive or they're going to be both negative. Okay, so the question is, how do we know now what they're going to be? Is it going to be a positive or is it going to be negative inside those brackets? Okay, how we know that is that we look at the next sign. So this guy over here. So when our sign is positive, this sign tells us what sign is going to be in the bracket. Alright, so that one tells us which sign we're going to use. Alright, so that's a positive. So we're going to get a positive and a positive. Okay, very exciting stuff. So along the very similar lines, let's say we had ax minus bx and then a positive c. Okay, so first thing, you're going to look at the sign of your constant value. Okay, so this guy here is a positive, so once again it tells us that our signs are going to be the same. Let's bring that up to there. Okay, so signs are going to be the same. So either they're going to be positive or it's going to be negative. Alright, so which sign goes in there is given to us by this guy. Alright, so that's a minus, so we know that we're going to get a minus and a minus in the bracket. Alright, so as to which sign, same thing. We always look at what's in front of the x, the coefficient of the x, to tell us which sign we're going to use. Alright, cool. So that's what happens when we have a positive in front of our constant term. So let's look now if we have a negative in front of our constant term. Okay, so minus c. Okay, cool. So what does that tell us? This minus here, that lets us know that we have the signs in our brackets are going to be different. So signs in the brackets are different. So in other words, one of them is going to be a positive and one of them is going to be a negative. And this is always the case, regardless of the sign that's in front of our b. It's always going to be a minus and always going to be a plus. Okay, order doesn't matter. We'll get into what to put in here at a bit later in terms of our numbers. Okay, so let's get into some actual examples. Okay, so there's two different ways of doing a trinomial. Okay, and it depends on our value of a. So if our a value, the coefficient in front of our x squared, is equal to 1, we have our simpler form of trinomial, which is x squared plus 7x plus 12. Okay, cool. So notice here that our coefficient in front of our x squared is 1. Okay, so largely they're going to just write it like that. So we got to know that it's 1. If they give you this, we can put in our brackets straight away. Alright, then we're going to look at our sign of our constant term. That's a positive, right? So that means that our signs are going to be the same. Cool beans. And then we look to this guy to tell us what those signs are going to be. So we know it's going to be a positive and a positive. Okay, cool. When we're doing this simple form of a trinomial, we can put in our x's straight away. Okay, so now we need to find these values here. Alright, so what we do is we look at our constant term, our 12, and we're going to find our factors of 12. 2 times 6 and 3 times 4. Okay, so since both of these are positive and a positive, we're looking for our factors of 12. We're going to add them together, would give us that number there, so it would give us a 7. So in this case, it's obvious that we'd use 3 and 4, right? 3 plus 4 gives me a 7. Any other variation wouldn't work. So we put in our 3 and our 4. And that there is how we factorize our trinomial. Okay, cool. Just remember that if we had to FOIL this out, we should get back to our original. That's how we know that we have done it right. Okay, so if you have time in your test and your exam, just FOIL this out, FOIL your answer out, and see if you get back to your question. So we should get back to there if we've done it correctly. So x times x gives me x squared, x plus times 4 gives me 4x, 3 times x gives me 3x, and then 3 times 4 gives me positive 12. And if I add that all together, I get 7x plus 12. And that's exactly what we had in the beginning, so I know that I'm right. Which is pretty cool about factorizing, is that you can always check your work to see if you're correct or not. Yeah, so just make sure if you have a time in your test, just go back and have a look at all your factorizing to make sure that it's correct. Okay, cool. Let's have a look at another example. Okay, this time x squared minus 2x minus 15. Okay, this here we notice straight away that firstly it's a simple trinomial, so we can put in our two brackets, right? There's no coefficients in front of that x squared. Cool. What we also know is that we can put in an x and we can put in an x. Now we just need to have a look at our signs. So once again, for our signs, we look at our coefficients, our constant term, the sign in front there. That's a negative. That means that we're going to get one positive and one negative. So we can put that in as well. Minus and a positive. Cool. So we're almost there. Now we just need to figure out what numbers to sub in. So we're going to look at our 15, right? And we're going to find our factors of 15. So we've got 1 times 15, 2 doesn't work, 3 times 5, and that's it. Okay, so, but now I must just be a little bit careful, because we have a minus sign and a plus sign. Okay, so that means that we have to get our factors that differ to give me a minus 2. So in other words, we're going to subtract these from each other. So when we have a minus, we have to subtract our factors. Okay, so here we're looking for minus 2. Obviously 1 minus 15 doesn't work. That gives me minus 14. So we're going to be looking at these guys here. So if we go minus 3 plus 5, we get a positive 2. But we're not looking for a positive 2. We're looking for a minus 2. So let's swap those guys around. We get minus 5 plus 3 gives me a minus 2. Cool beans. So in other words, the bracket with our minus must get the 5, and our bracket with the positive must get our 3. So that gets a 5 and that gets a 3. And there we are done. Okay, let's do another one of those negatives, because they can get a little bit tricky. So the only thing is just remember that your factors have to differ. So you have to subtract your factors to get the answer in the middle, to get that middle term. All right, let's have one more example of that. All right, so we have x squared minus 6x minus 7. Okay, cool. We notice that the coefficient in front of our x squared is 1. So I can put in my brackets straight away. I can also put in my x straight away. And now we've got to think about our signs. So this is a minus. What does that tell us? That inside a bracket, one of them is going to be a plus and one of them is going to be a minus sign. Cool. So I can also write that in straight away. Plus and a minus. All right, now we need to find our numbers. So we do our constant term, we find our factors of our constant term. So 7 is a prime number, so we only have 1 times 7. Okay, so this one's relatively easy. We just have to look at which one gets a minus and which one gets a positive. So we are looking for a minus 6. So if we go 7 minus 1, we're going to get a positive 6. So that's not the one we're going to use. We use a 1 minus 7, we're going to get a negative 6. So that's the right one. Alright, so in other words, the one with the bracket with the positive gets a 1, and the bracket with the negative gets the 7. Easy work. So the negative gets the 7, and the positive gets the 1. And we are done. Okay, great. So that's how we do trinomials with a coefficient of when the a is a 1. Okay, so let's have a look now at a slightly more complicated case. So if a is not equal to 1, all right, equal to 2, 3, minus 4, whatever. Okay, so here we have 2x squared plus 6x plus 4. Okay, so I just want to say that just because now there's a coefficient in front of our a, in terms of our sign, the information that we can get out of the signs is still exactly the same. So we know here that we need the same sign, right? Same signs. And then we're going to look at our next term here. This one tells us the sign that they're going to be. So they're both going to be positive. Okay, so it's exactly the same as we did before. The only difference now is that we can't write our brackets in straight away. Okay, so what we have to do to find our factors, normally like the last one, we just did our factors of 4, but that's not what we need to do now. What we actually need to do is go 2 times our constant term, so our coefficient in front of our x squared times our constant, so we're going to get 8, and we find our factors of 8. So 2 times, those are our factors there. Okay, so that's the main difference that we're going to be doing, and you'll see the working out is slightly different as well, but we end up with a very similar thing. We're going to still end up with our 2 brackets. Okay, so what we're going to do now, we're going to look at our factors, right? Which one of these factors add up to give me a positive 6. So exactly the same as we did before, right? So if it's, this can only give me 9, this one here can give me a 6, so that's the one we're going to use. But now instead of putting them in brackets, we're just going to write it down like this. Plus 2x plus 4x plus 4. So see, what I did actually was I broke up this 6 into a plus 2 and a plus 4. So if I had to add those up, I just get straight back to 6x. So I haven't changed the value of the sum at all. This just helps me with my factorizing. Alright, great. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to block off these 2 terms for now. Alright? So just imagine those aren't there. Okay, just use your thumb in a test. Obviously don't erase it. I just can't show my thumb digitally. Okay, so you look at your first 2 terms and you take out what's common. Alright, so in this case we have a 2x that's common. Alright, so we take out 2x and we write what's left. So in this case we're going to have an x there and then plus 1. Alright, so now let's look back at the other terms that we had. Plus 4. Alright, so ignore these terms for now. And we're going to take out a common factor between the last 2 terms. So like I said before, just block that off with your thumb. And you're going to have a look here. So we're going to take out a 4 and we're left with x plus 1. Okay. Now we just need to figure out what sign we need to put in here. So we just go 4 times x gives me 4x. We look for that term over here. We get a 4x. That's a positive, so I know that this must give me a positive. Okay, cool beans. So I'm just going to write in the whole sum now. Okay, great. Now what you'll notice is that if you've done this correctly, this bracket and this bracket are identical. Okay, and now this is where the fun part comes in. We're going to take out that bracket as a common factor, right? We're going to take out a common bracket. X plus 1, bracket, bracket, bracket. So now we cross out our, this one. You can just block that off with your thumb once again. So we've taken that out and we're just going to write what's left. So the 2x is left and the 4 is left. And it's a positive 4, so that's where that sign comes from. So once again, we've got our two brackets. So notice here, the main difference is that before we had just an x minus a constant, x minus a constant. Now we're going to have a coefficient in one of our brackets and then our constants on the end. So that there is the main difference in our factorizing. Okay, so let's go over that. I know it's quite a bit of information to take in. So let's do another one. So 3x squared plus 4x minus 7. Okay, cool. So once again, we are going to look at our signs, right? That's a minus. So that tells me I need to have one of them needs to be a positive, or okay, so I wrote negative. One of them needs to be a negative, and one of them needs to be a positive. All right, and then this sign tells me what they need to add up to, right? So I need to get a positive 4. I need to get a positive 4 over there. All right, so we're going to do our factors, but remember now we've got a coefficient in front of our x squared, so we don't just do the factors of 7. We go 3 times 7, right? We get 21. So we find our factors of 21. 2 doesn't work, 3 times 7. Okay, so we've got our factors there. So now we're going to look, remember, when this is a minus, our factors have to differ to give us a 4, right? So we have to minus each other. So in this case, the only one that's going to work is our 3 and our 7. So once again, the tricky part comes in where with which one of these numbers is going to get the positive and which one's going to get a negative. So if we have 7 minus 4, we're going to get a, what am I saying, 4. Sorry, 7 minus 3, I'm thinking ahead to the answer, is going to give me a positive 4. Alright, if I did it the other way, minus 3 plus 7, minus 7 plus 3, we're going to get a negative 4. So obviously that's the one to go because we have a plus 4 there and we have a plus 4 over here. Okay, alright, so now remember we just don't put it straight into brackets, we're going to break it up. Right, we write down our factors over here with the x. So we get a minus 3x and a positive 7x minus 7. Okay, so remember that term was just broken up into those two. Alright, so what we're going to do, we block out those last two terms with your thumb. So we're just looking at the first two terms and we're going to take out a common factor. Alright, so let's take out a 3. Alright, we take out a 3 and we can also take out an x. And we're going to write what's left. We're left with x minus 1. Okay, now we do the same except we block off the first two terms and we look at the last two terms. So we're going to take out a factor of 7. And what's left is x minus 1. Okay, cool. So now we just need to see what sign must go here. So we go 7 times x. Gives me 7x. We look for our 7x over there. It's a positive, so that gives me a positive. Okay, cool beans. Now for the exciting part, we take out a common bracket out of that little equation that we're doing. Okay, so we take out a common bracket and we see what's left over. Here we're going to be left with a 3x and we're going to be left with that 7. And there we have factorized. Alright, cool beans. Let's go for another one. Okay, so I'm going to go a little bit faster these ones now. I don't want to bore you too much. 2x squared minus 11x plus 5. Okay, cool. So I know my signs are going to be the same. Right, we look at this one. They're both going to be a minus and a minus. So my factors are both going to be negatives. Alright, I go 2 times 5. That gives me 10. So I look at my factors of 10. 2 times 5. Alright, so they both need to be a minus and they need to get me to minus 11. So in this case, I'm going to be using 1 and 10. Alright, so I've got 2x squared minus 1x minus 10x plus 5. Okay, remember that is ended up being that. So I look at my first two terms, I take out a common factor. In this case, it's just an x. So I'm left with 2x minus 1, right? I look at my next two terms, I take out a common factor. In this case, it's a 5. I'm left with 2x, but now just be careful, because there's a minus here. So if I put the brackets, you remember we want our brackets to be identical. So we're actually looking for minus 1, right? And it makes sense, because if we go 5 times 2, gives me 10x, and I look, here is a minus, right? Sorry, I just want to look neat. There's a minus. So whenever we have a minus on the outside of our bracket, we have to change our signs inside our bracket. So this minus 5 became a minus. So, that positive 5 became a minus, right? So also now our brackets are the same. We take those out, 2x minus 1, bracket, bracket, and x minus 5. We just write what's left. All right, cool. Let's do another one. Okay, so we have 5x squared minus 2x minus 3. Okay, cool beans. So this sign here tells me that one of my factors are going to be a positive and one of them is going to be a negative. Right, I find my factors of 5 times 3. Right, 5 times 3 gives me 15. 1 times 15, 2 times 5. And I need them to differ to give me a minus 2. So in this case, I'm going to use this guy. Alright, so if we go to minus 2 plus 5, we're going to get a positive 3. If we go minus 5 plus 2, we're going to get... Sorry, I did my factors wrong. That needs to be a 3. 3 times 5, obviously. Alright, so let's start again. So if we have minus 3 plus 5, we're going to get to a positive 2, which is not the one we need. So if we got minus 5 plus 3, we're going to get a negative 2, which is exactly what we need. Okay, cool. So let's fill it in. 5